Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the channel. I am Michael Reddy, aka Musical Theater Writer Guy, aka your musical theater writing coach. And today I am conducting an interview with one of my clients and the members of the Musical Theater Writing Collective, and that is Steve Drieman. Steve, welcome! Thank you so much for joining me here today.
Hello, Michael. I'm super excited to be here, and thank you so much for taking the time to have this chat with me.
Of
Um,
course.
yeah, it's like I think the first interview I've done for since forever. So I thought to myself, I might as well do it with one of the nicest, friendliest, most interesting people I know. So I'm just happy to be here with
Oh
you
my
today.
gosh, stop. Tell me more. Um, well, you're absolutely lovely, and I enjoy chatting with you all the time. I mean, the two of us, we can rant. We'll try not to rant today, friends. The kind of framing of this conversation is, and maybe y'all out there can relate to this a bit. I know in my own journey, I can definitely relate, but kind of going from a sense of not knowing exactly where you are, what direction to head when coming into musical theater writing, but instead to finding focus and clarity and knowing where you want to be heading along the way. And I mean, I've been watching Steve go through this journey with this fantastic show that we're going to talk about today, which uh, I'll say more about soon, but there are very few times in life when there's a genre that is not my genre, like not my go-to kind of show where I'm like, I am so excited about this. I want more. And this show is one of them, my friend. So you're in for a treat today. We're gonna be introducing the show a bit. But before we introduce the show, hey, Steve, why don't you tell the people a little bit about who you are and how you identify creatively?
Sure. So I'm Steve, pronoun he, him, and I actually started out, and I'm still working as a film composer, musician, which I guess had like this huge influence on how I approach storytelling. And for a long time, I think music has been my first and only language when it comes to expressing emotions and telling a story. Um, and I guess as an artist, I'm really interested kind of in finding like a balance between, entertainment and depth and, telling a meaningful story while still having fun with it. Many of my film scores actually been horror films and sci-fi, which are like my favorite genres. So this is the sort of thing I'm kind of aiming to do with the show. So I guess I'm a musician slash writer in, definition.
Beautiful and brilliant, and also like specifically a musical theater writer too. We're gonna
Oh yeah,
put
yeah,
that into
that
that
thing.
identity.
That thing, that
Um,
little thing. Yeah.
yeah, which includes book, music, and lyrics at this point. And I know we're gonna say more about that in a
Yeah.
minute. Also, just where are you zooming in from?
Sorry, I didn't get that.
Where are you zooming in from?
Oh, I'm zooming from beautiful London. Perfect weather. I wish
Okay,
it's gonna stay like that through the whole winter. It won't, but it's really nice.
really nice.
And
Yeah,
yeah.
just so our community, yeah, I always say that we're international, and people, I don't think get the opportunity to hear much from people who are outside of the US doing this thing that is so American at its roots for so many
Mm-hmm.
reasons, but there really are so many of us across the world doing this. And so, kind of, one of the things that brings us into conversation today, everyone, is Steve and I were talking a bit about before we began about how it can be tempting to think when going into musical theater writing for the first time that, like, you know how to do it, and you've seen shows, and it's easy. It looks easy, right? It's very straightforward when you're watching. You think you can just kind of like experiment your way through it and make it happen. And I know I certainly thought that a bit in my early journey, but that there's a lot more to it than meets the eye. There's a lot to learn, a lot of mistakes that you not only can make, but will make along the way. And I think the other major thing is how to, like, this is a long-term journey. Musical theater writing is not a short-term thing. So part of what
For
we'll
sure.
talk about today is like, how do we do it? How do we stick with it, make it sustainable? Because across the time it takes to make this happen, there will be, I think, a bit of an artistic internal journey, some struggle that comes along with it, which is not a bad thing. I think it's just kind of part and parcel. So if any of this resonates with you, I think you're really going to enjoy today's interview as we talk about Steve's journey. Um, but would you like to say any more about that, or do you want to dive into talking about the show a little bit first, get people caught up to where we are?
Yeah, I mean, we could start with I can kind of give you the show sort of premise in a nutshell.
Okay, let's do it.
So yeah, the premise, or I've been working on the show is titled Electric Love Murder Machine,
One more
and
time slower for us.
Electric Love Murder Machine.
That's right. Love that
Yeah.
title. Please continue.
Yeah, yeah. It's not my title. We'll talk about more about that coming on. But yeah, it's a really, I think it kind of encapsulates, sort of the theme and the tone of the show. And I've been working on it for, I think, like it's been about 6 years now, which is kind of crazy. In preparation to our talk, I kind of, dug into my hard drives and all. And, what do you know? Time is actually moving forward. And,
What?
but I know it's crazy. But, more precisely, the seed was planted 6 years ago. But the actual development of this as a musical theater project started about a year and a half ago, which is about around the time when you and I met.
Yes.
And I'll get to that. It's science fiction, horror musical set in the late 80s, in 1989 to be exact. And it's inspired by American B movies, things like Night of the Creeps and Chopping Mall and Weird Science and Prom Night, all that good stuff, and 80s pop culture in general, but with a lot of heart kind of underneath all that wildness. And I like to think about it as my attempt, like, think of Friday the 13th, but directed by John Hughes kind of thing.
Ha!
So, worlds collide.
Yeah, that's funny.
Yeah, I mean, the premise, I think, is really fun. It kind of centers around this group of high school friends slash band members who break into this soon to be open shopping mall to play their canceled prom gig. And it's kind of their like last chance to perform together for various reasons. However, they find themselves caught between a killer android and its unhinged creator. And then things kind of take even a wilder turn when, through this weird science accident, the android designed to kill is imprinted with human emotions. So
Okay.
that's like in a nutshell. And there's a lot of humor and gore and teenage drama and sexual awakening. And it's all kind of, tightly wrapped in synth pop rock musical score. Um, and I think, and we'll talk about this more later, but one of the things that, is kind of, it's a challenge while the world building and story elements are, campy and over the top. The characters are relatable people dealing with real issues kind of thing. So it's coming of age story identity, lots of stuff, self-discovery, clash between humanity and technology, the ability or inability to change and move forward. And I actually, if I had to give like the really short answer to what the story is all about, for me personally, I would say it's about discovering your true self in a world that values the wrong things. That sort
Ah,
of, yeah, yeah. I knew
that's
you'd like that.
yeah. I like it not only because I love that message and theme, just generally, because like, hi, yes, all of us, I think we can relate post-pandemic for sure. But in addition, just knowing your show so well at this point, I'm like, yes, that's the thing. It's that. Just
Yeah.
wrapped in this beautiful and very complex, very layered package that's hitting on so much in this beautiful, weird sci-fi horror world that you've created, but with characters you so quickly fall in love with. I love these
Thank you.
characters so much.
Thank you so
Um,
much.
and it's quirky in all the right ways. So friends out there, we're gonna hear some music today, but I think if you're a fan of if you're a fan of musicals and also be sci-fi horror, you're going to enjoy the show for sure. But I think if you enjoy scores like Heather's or uh, Legally Blonde or What's it? It's not like Night of the Living Dead. What's it called? The undead musical. Ah,
Oh,
I can't think of the name.
they did the Evil Dead
Evil
musical.
Dead. Evil Dead. You know, or anything that's got a super 80s vibe to it as well. I think this is a show that's going to live adjacently to a lot of these worlds. And I think it's going to be of a lot of interest. I also think a lot of teenagers are going to hop onto this train and be like, "Ooh, I want to do this." That's
Sure.
how I feel about it. You see, I told y'all I get excited about this. This is not my genre. Like B horror is so not my genre, but here we are.
Knowing you, I take it as the biggest compliment, honestly, because I can see you're so enthusiastic about it. And yeah, I think when the show, would resonate with people who would love kind of the genre storytelling, science fiction and horror, and that mix of camp and emotional depth as well. There's like
Oh yeah, like Rocky horror fans are gonna like this.
Oh yeah, yeah, for sure. I mean, this is like more like when I was researching for the story, I was looking into the whole Frankenstein sort of, archetype because there is, let's put it out there, we have a mad scientist creating an android. So that's a thing. And there's also I like a queer element to the story that I think will speak to the LGBTQ plus audiences, especially those who may have felt kind of underrepresented in the typical 80s narrative, because we were kind of limited to being canon fodder, unsympathetic comic reliefs, or both, but not a lot more than that. So
Or
it's
ignored
definitely not,
completely.
yeah. So yeah, it's kind of a different game here, thankfully. Yeah, and yeah, I just I also want it to be, I think, in terms of tone, I would say unapologetically feel good because we have so much, media that is dark and heavy these days, which only makes sense in a dark and heavy world we're living in. And I think like while Electric Love Murder Machine does deal with some serious issues, I think at its core, it is like a joyful, uplifting experience. And I love people to kind of, leave the theater feeling they've had great time while also connecting with something deeper. Yeah,
Yeah,
that would be the
yeah,
ideal scenario.
that all of that, and also what I'll add to the pile here is this is, and we're gonna get here, but this has been a part of the journey of writing the show as well, is finding that balance between this is a horror at the end of the day, it is sci-fi, it is horror, and there's like personal relationship elements that are, they tug at your heartstrings a bit and like, oh gosh, oh, I wish you wouldn't make that choice sort of way. But also like there's gonna be splurting blood as well. And it's walking the line between having that be in there and maintaining the fun and the joy throughout the piece, which I've been watching you go through that process. I think you're finding a really beautiful balanced line.
Yeah.
Um, but I'm so curious, can you take us back to the beginning? How did this project start?
Yeah, sure. So like I said, it was the project started with when my collaborator Leland Frankel and I were toying with this musical adaptation of Chopping Mall, this 1986 cult film, and like very quickly we kind of decided to make our own original story. And the things that survived from that shopping mall premise was the mall shopping mall setting, and the fact that film has those robots roaming around. They looked more like kind of washing machines on wheels shooting lasers. It was super campy. It's a great film, but we have an android, not a robot. He identifies as an android. um, so that was like the initial incarnation, and we came up with the story and characters and wrote early versions of some of the songs and kind of considered different ways on how to release it. And we thought it could be an audio drama, it could be a concept album, it could be a film. And, we didn't know where exactly we wanted to take it. And we had like this very clear division of, I was in charge of music and Leland was my partner in crime. He was writing the lyrics and the story, the script. And then at some point, we kind of decided to develop it as a stage musical But then that's also when it became clear that he won't be available to continue working on it. And we talked about the situation, which I think it's so important to do with whomever you are in working relations with. Just talk about stuff, just talk about it. Things can be much more simpler than you think. And basically, I had like three choices. I could either, abandon the project, I could wait for the right opportunity to collaborate with someone else,
Mhm.
or I could take the reins and write the book, lyrics, and music myself. And you know me, I never bite more than I can chew. So naturally, I chose the third option. And yeah, I just wanted to really like take a minute to kind of acknowledge, the fact that again, Leland, my original writing partner, who is an award-winning writer and director, and just an altogether awesome, really great guy, he was absolutely crucial in defining, the concept for Electric Love Murder Machine. He literally came up with the show's title, and I think there's something really important about acknowledging not just our current working relationships, but also, situations when things kind of working great until they're not, and just because a collaboration reaches like a natural end and doesn't take away from everything that brought to the table up until that point.
Absolutely.
Um, so I think it's important just, recognize when things need to change without diminishing the value of what came before. And on that end, it worked. The decision was made, and I was transitioning from working in a collaboration on this project to working solo.
Yeah, and this is the period of time in which I met you originally because
It was
if I
it was a little
recall,
before that. Yeah, you met me. So what happened actually is
oh,
that
okay.
like you know, I sat down and I wrote the first draft, of the show.
Right.
And this is when we kind of met,
Mhm.
because I felt like, it things kind of I needed to take the next step and see what I had on my hands. Sometimes when you're deep in a project, it's hard to get a perspective about what's working, what's not working. And I felt like I just wanted to kind of better educate myself about musical theater in general. So, I started doing some research to find resources and maybe
Mhm.
like a program or something online community that could help me with that. But for some reason, I couldn't find many good options, at least not something that I felt like was, jiving for me.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And this is when I came across your YouTube channel, actually, musical theater writer guy. And I started watching your videos, and it was a light bulb moment for me because you were kind of breaking down the exact things that I was struggling with,
Mm,
and that led me to kind of reach out and start our conversation and mentorship process.
yeah.
Um, so I would kind of say that phase one of the whole thing was, up until a year and a half ago when I had this idea. I didn't know exactly where to take it. I wrote a first draft. It worked on some levels, but it definitely didn't feel like it was, I kind of felt stuck and I
Yeah.
needed to, I think it was down to really better educate myself. And yeah,
Yeah. It's
that's the
hard
job
to
that needs to be done.
find that clarity if you feel like you don't necessarily have the information and the tools in order to figure out what is clear about your show and what the next steps are and where you're headed. So
Sure.
yeah, I hear that, and just also for the audience here, um, for clarity, where the journey with the collaborator is concerned as well. So Steve
Yeah,
reached out initially for a script and score review, which is
right.
a service that I offer, attaching a coaching session on, so we would do face-to-face feedback, which was lovely and wonderful. And yeah, the first script I read through definitely read a bit more like a B movie film. And also some of the music felt connected and some of it didn't. And so in our first conversation, you were very upfront with me about, well, here's the world I come from, this music writing world. this script is new, but the concept isn't. And here's my collaborator with that concept. Here's who I've been working with, and you weren't even sure necessarily yet. Are are we not going to continue with this, the two of us? Do I want to pick up someone else? There was that major question, especially
Yeah,
early on, of
yeah,
am I able to do book and lyrics? And
for
I know
sure.
that that was something you grappled with for a while.
Yeah, I sure did. Again, I think, uh, working the transition from collaboration to working solo is a big shift.
Yeah.
Um,
Yes.
Especially, yeah, I mean, because I was always more comfortable with writing music, English isn't my first language. So at the time, I wasn't sure if I was really up to the task of writing the book and the lyrics on my own.
Sure.
And besides that, in a collaboration, you kind of have someone to bounce ideas with. You share the workload. It makes it easier to stay motivated as well. So because you take the load at different times and you push through blocks. And, once I was on my own, that safety net was gone and I had to take kind of like, full responsibility for the process. And there were definitely times where I would second guess myself and wonder if I was, making the right creative choices. Sometimes you're like you feel something is right, but then you say to yourself, "Oh, but this is too easy. It can be right. I need to second guess myself." You know what I mean? And you don't necessarily ask the right questions. And other stuff, which are like big kind of heaps of trouble right ahead, you kind of ignore and you move forward. Oh no, that's fine. That'll work itself. No, it won't, buddy. It will bite you in the tuchus, if you will ignore this. So I think it's about knowing, like, if you ask the right questions, you're more than halfway there.
Mm.
And it's a skill that needs to be learned, asking the right questions at the right time. Um, and I think, like, one of the changes that I was able to kind of go through when we started working together and, process the show when I came to you, it was actually acknowledging the stuff that working solo, what the opportunity in this situation. So going solo gave me, like, a lot of freedom, and it allowed me to explore the story and themes in my own way, and it pushed me also to trust, instincts as I grow as a writer, and like flexing creative muscles that I didn't use before. And I think it also made the project more personal for me. Gave me a chance to prove myself to myself that I could do it. There's definitely something to be said about doing this on your own. I just think it's a different experience. I won't call it a better experience, worse experience than working with someone else. It's just different, and you need
Yeah.
to kind of figure out for yourself what's best for you. I remember that at some points we had some talks and I was like, Michael, I need to find someone else to work with. And we talked about this and you said, okay, it's fine. You can find someone else to work with. Just, kind of take under consideration that this, and that will have to kind of change. You won't have the sort of liberty you have had up until now. And then I said, no, I want that liberty.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. I mean, that's not only a fair consideration, generally speaking, when it comes to working alone versus working with another writer, but also I think uh, for clarity, like I wasn't pushing you in any direction. You weren't necessarily running in either of these directions either. And it really came down to like just fleshing out like what are the positives of keeping this solo? What are the positives of a collaborator? What are the negatives of each of those as well? And then the thing I always return to, and I'm sure you will say more about this as we talk about our experiences together, but like the major question I always ask is why,
Why?
right? Why the collaborator? And I think that brought up probably the beginnings of some internal journey stuff as an artist in musical theater that I know I've watched you explore over the past year and a half.
For sure. Um,
But
Yeah, I mean, I think part of kind of facing these questions, I started, I went on this sort of, it sounds kind of, maybe cliche, but this sort of self-discovery sort of journey with myself as an artist and as someone who wants to tell a story. And movies have always like been a huge part of my life, and I kind of, this is what I started with when I asked myself what sort of storytelling I want to do, and it was about films. It's no coincidence this show is about, it's taking its inspiration from films, and you know yeah, I think it's like I discovered some things about myself during this journey that helped me to harness those, realizations into sort of creative fuel, that enabled me to work on things and explore them. You know, like for example, I kind of looked back and I remembered, uh, I kind of asked myself. I think we could talk about like the North Star question set, which is
Sure. Yeah.
something that, was my introduction when we started our conversation. Then, this is something you introduced me to. And it's normally, I wouldn't even start with this sort of, self-questioning set. I'm so happy I did. This is when relying on someone else's experience, like yourself, proves to be super useful. And this question set, I believe you when you start out with a new client, you kind of they want to write a new show. This is like more or less the first step that you do to kind of get introduced with their, what kind of thing. I would put the title on that question set, "What am I doing here?" You know, because this is like basically the question that you need to answer. You
Yeah.
know, writing a musical show, it's a big thing, and if you're here to do a musical like a show, you kind of you better figure out why are you here. So it wasn't about like the actual synopsis or outline or specifics. It's more about the general premise. What's it about? Why am I telling this story? Why in musical form? And who it's for. So these questions made me ask myself what the show was really about beyond that, surface level killer android and 80s nostalgia kind of
Yeah.
thing. And up until that point, I think I had like all these ideas and creative elements kind of swirling around, but I hadn't fully articulated the deeper purpose behind it or what they represented to me. And I think what's amazing about, the North Star question is that it's also good practice to revisit them
Yeah.
after a while, which I did not once, but twice. I did it like 6 months after we started working. And, I remember reading it, answering, and already saw that I have like a clearer vision of the story and the characters. And then I actually took the questions for a third time, not long before this interview. And I was so pleasantly surprised to kind of realize that my vision for the show and the reason why I'm doing what I'm doing in this specific way have continued to evolve.
Yeah.
So the answers kind of kept growing and deepening. And I've come to really like interesting conclusions that I'd love to share with you today if we'll have time. It's just, I think, great to see how much this process keeps refining the heart of the show, of actually asking questions about why I'm here, why am I doing this, what this means to you, what kind of audience you'd like to tell the story to.
Yeah.
It likes questions I wouldn't normally think about before starting a show. Come on, I want to write good, cool songs. I want to write jokes. I want to do the fun things. I don't want to answer those philosophical, questions. But damn, it works. It just, I'm so happy I
Uh,
did.
yeah. Well, can I admit something to you?
Sure.
So I had only officially used those question sets, which for the audience, by the way, if you don't know me and these question sets, there is a free download of this. I'll put it in the description below for this. It's 6 sets of questions that are blocked out specifically and in a specific order to answer at, as Steve is saying, pretty much at any point in your process. Go back to them. They are your North Star. That's why I call them that. But I always have people answer them right away when we start working together. I think everyone should answer them up front when you're going into a musical project to begin with. And then, yes, they will change, evolve, narrow down as you go further along. But I only use them officially with, I think you were my third client, but it was Steve sent me a Voxer message that just gushed about what those questions did for the show and like for your thought process around it and how you were approaching it as a writer. And it was because of you sending me that Voxer message that I decided I should just turn this into a PDF and give this to people. So
I'm so
I
happy
actually
to
have
hear
you to
that.
thank.
Oh man. So yeah, that makes me super happy to hear that. Sometimes you just don't know. I would generally say that your community that you've created is the absolute treasure trove of information about musical, writing musical theater, both your YouTube channel, like the amount of information is absolutely staggering. And yeah, I think it's like the North Star question set was the first tool that you introduced to me that really kind of, put me on a way to figuring out what I want to do. And if you remember, the next thing we did was actually the outline, which
Oh,
took the
yes.
good old outline. And again, I think, and I talked to a friend yesterday, and I was like telling him about, yeah, I did the outline for like, I don't know, for a month or so, and he said, "Oh, you don't just write. I thought you're just gonna, if you have a story, just start writing it, and things will kind of, it's gonna be okay." And I think it's such an easy mistake to make because it does make sense in a way, when
It
you're
does.
writing a story, you know, you would say that things will come to you as you go. But I think actually spending a lot of time or enough time on a solid outline before jumping to writing is probably the smartest thing you can do. It's laying down those thematic and structural foundations to the story. It could take a while. I did like actually I'd share. Let me just share my screen for a second. I have like this sort of slightly blurry version of my outline.
Like the final one or the first one?
It's the first one, the
Oh,
final one. Sorry. But yeah, just so you could kind of
because this was a back and forth process, folks. We talked about this a
mhm.
lot, and yeah, I mean, going through the process of refining it
Yeah.
to be both functional and also to do the story beating that Steve was aiming for. This was a lot of what that early work was me trying to suss out from Steve in his words of what's the story we're telling, what do you want it to feel like, where do you want the emphasis to be, how much musical theater structure do we want to use, how much B movie structure do we want to use. So yeah, this was quite the process.
Yeah. Do you get that at all? The screen share I've just did, like,
No, I think actually because you had been sharing audio before, go ahead and
oh,
stop your share first, and then you should be able to reshare and go into screen.
okay. Let's try that again.
Zoom, folks. Yeah, Zoom,
Yeah.
everybody. We're still here. We're still on Zoom. There we are. We're
There we go.
sharing.
Yeah, so yeah, basically, this is like it says like the first revision of that thing, and it's basically those kind of questions and kind of things you would like to consider. Is it going to be a three or five act sort of structure? Um, is there going to be an intermission? I remember when you first read my original draft, you said, "Do you want to make a 3 hour show?" And I was like, "No, not really." And you said, because this is how much stuff you have here, like 3 hours. And I'm like, okay, we need to we need to work this out. So yeah, and then basically each of those posts, it's a scene, and you get the sense of, the division between the acts. You can kind of clearly tell the balance between where you've put the focus on this character or that character, the journey. It's not supposed to be something super, specific. It just tells you how the story progresses. And of course, you're going to use those, sort of classic, the climax should hit right before act break. And you want to have your inciting incident way early, preferably in scene, in scene your first scene or so or around there. So things like that. but this wasn't the case when I first broke down the original draft into, like this sort of thing. It looked a whole of a lot different and it didn't make a lot of sense in some levels. So, but it was so worth doing this because again, it's not like you do want to jump into do the fun stuff. That's only natural. And yeah, I would say definitely that, it's more fun to write songs and listen to write a joke or things like that, but the outline really becomes like a roadmap, so you can take detours and discover new things along
Absolutely.
the way, and you're going to absolutely be doing tons of rewrites, but you won't be wandering aimlessly. You got your
Yeah.
structure and you got your plot points, and they're kind of locked in early in the way, in a way that serves the story and the tone. That's also super important. If something happens that, kind of defies the whole tone of the show, but you keep it there, then you would end up, creating like it's like almost like that what's that film when, you take one when she misses the train or she doesn't miss the train, and then there are like it branches into two storylines, revolving doors, I want to say, or something like
Uh-huh.
that.
But
There's this,
yeah.
yeah, that lady, she tries to get to her train, and then the film kind of departs, and you have two scenarios in which she was able to get inside the train, on the other, she missed the train, and it tells how different her life became
Mm,
through these two kind of, mundane kind of thing that happened. But the same thing could happen, I think, when you have like kind of the wrong structure, you don't hit like a certain point, and it just makes like smaller creative decisions a whole of a lot easier when everything serves the story. And I just can't, recommend it enough. Like in dark and stormy nights, when you hit that fourth version of the same song, you can tell yourself, my walls, maybe I need paint on my walls, but I have a roof over my head, kind of thing. I got a structure. So yeah,
yeah. Yeah, and
outline.
what I'll add to this, because I know there are plenty of people out there who would consider themselves pantsers, right by the seat of their pants rather than planners.
Hmm.
As someone who identifies as both, depending on the project, uh, I think the major thing here is your outlining doesn't need to be super intense, right? That was a post-it outline,
Yeah,
essentially.
yeah,
And I always say to people, we need at the very least to know your big story beats and your general structure. So, for instance, this show is in a 5 act structure, and then story beat wise, there's usually somewhere between 7 to 16, depending on the type of musical and the length of the musical, complexity of the musical, right? I'm using the term story beats. That's a literary term that's often utilized. I often use the word tent poles, your major tent poles, of which honestly most musicals have about 12. That's the average. And if you know that and you know the general structure of the show, if you're super intense like I can get with planning, yeah, you can do a detailed outline and then it's easier to kind of pants the rest of the process. But you can also just like know those major story beats and just kind of go for it from there. I just got, all right, I'm at this story beat, you need to get to that story beat. Let's see what happens. And there's nothing wrong with that. But I think having, yeah, that knowing there's a roof over your head makes all the difference in the world.
yeah, for sure, for sure. I mean, it's just kind of you don't need to kind of over worry about that because you can get your resources into, you know, doing other stuff like, looking at this sort of micro level of things. You don't need to go back constantly and see, oh man, that doesn't work. No, it does. It, the kind of the general, journey. And, even when I'm making like big changes, and I made some big changes within the story to maybe better kind of bring a certain, aspect of a character. I never had to rewrite like take a whole scene out because the story still worked. I just needed to tweak those specifics, and that makes such a big difference.
100%. Yeah.
Hmm.
Oh, yes. Okay, so we've teased the people quite a bit here, Steve. So
Yeah,
can you talk to us a little bit about tone and finding the musical sound of the show?
yeah,
And I'd love to play some clips of this joyous piece. Do you want to play a clip first and then talk about that? Do you want
yeah.
to talk about it first and then play a clip?
We can play something. Music is
Great.
always, yeah, I like music.
Yeah, hit us with like 30 to 60 seconds of something good.
Yeah, yeah. Let's go
And the
for.
answer is so much of it is good. I love this show.
Thank you.
It's a blast.
So I will.
There are definitely a couple of motifs I'm hoping creep up today.
Yeah, let me just play you out like a snippet from Shop Till You Drop, which was again something I wasn't sure where to put it. We have the second scene, basically the shopping mall is about to open, but it doesn't. And this is like sort of the official jingle for the mall. And yeah, have a listen.
We're gonna need that sound share back.
Oh yeah,
So,
here we go.
there we go.
Ooh, there's a sale down by the corner. Ooh, I try my very best to warn her. Shop, shop, shop till you drop. Shop, shop till you drop.
That's what the TV tells. It's a message that sells.
Shop, shop, shop till you drop. Shop, shop till you drop. Shop till you drop. Shop till you. We bought a TV. We bought a table. You said,
Can we see that designer label?
It
Yeah,
is so delightfully of the time. My age is showing for sure, but like there's a certain
your
sound.
good taste is showing, you mean?
Aw, thanks. There's a certain sound to the music of the late 80s, yes, but also to the lyric writing and to the advertising of the late 80s that I think this hits so well.
Thank you
And
so much.
also, I think this was the beginning of our conversation about diegetic versus non-diegetic music,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah, it definitely was. And, I wasn't sure where to plant this thing. And I was thinking, should it be at the opening, like the opening number for the show? If you
Right.
remember, I had a whole framing story about this sort of true crime TV show that the
True.
whole story of the show was inside that TV show. And this is like the major chunks of fluff that we kind of decided to get rid of because it didn't like serve a purpose other than just being there.
Mm.
And then I wasn't sure where this song would go, and you were like, you wrote a jingle for a shopping mall. How about placing it in the day when they want to open that shopping mall and they play it to the audience? I'm like, oh, that's an idea. Yeah, so
And
it just
then beyond that, because always, I think one of the things that we've talked about a lot is making it feel like we're in a musical at all times. Make sure the
yeah.
theatricality of musical theater is constantly there. So even though, yeah, this is a diegetic song, it is a jingle, it's being played live in front of the mall. There's still plot happening during this song. It's not based on the people singing it. That's just a band over there. They're doing that. But there's stuff that happens, yes?
Yeah, for sure. There's dialogue going on, and actually, there's some sort of a personal tragedy that happens to one of the characters, the mall manager. He's about to cut the ribbon, and then police comes and say, "Listen, buddy, you got some serious code violations here. You can't open the mall." I mean, the whole kind of plot relies on the fact that the mall didn't open, so our heroes can actually sneak in and attempt to do their concert. So like this moment, it started as a celebration and it ends as a disaster for him while everyone are celebrating. So that's also kind of funny. And I think when we talk about like 80s music or the sound of the 80s in general, I mean, there's definitely more than one way to approach it. And there's what I call the modern interpretation of the 80s sound, which I really like. And it's being used today in pop music. It's really super popular. But, that's not what I tried to do here because this is a reinterpretation of something. And the 80s had such a wide variety of music. It wasn't
Yes.
just this. It was pop, it was rock, it was country, it was reggae. You can hear jazz music played, with, 80s instrumentation. And I think what gave it the sort of distinctive flavor was a combination of a few factors. One was new recording techniques that really utilized and experimented with that famous, 80s digital reverb of the vocals,
Yeah.
that gated snare drum,
Mhm.
that Phil Collins used a lot, and also, synthesizers that and drum machines that were brought into the mix, and emulating traditional organic instruments like, drums and bass and piano and orchestral sounds.
Yeah.
And what's interesting is that actually the limitations of technology gave the 80s its signature sound. So when you play like an authentic DX7, those keyboards from the 80s, and you play the patch for a trumpet, it wouldn't sound like a trumpet. It would
No.
sound like something that tries to be a trumpet. Um, and I think this is what like my kind of vision in terms of what sound I would like the songs to have. And I actually came across a quote from Brian Eno, um, legendary musician, and he kind of articulated something that really resonated with me. Can I share it with you, just to
Yes,
read it to you?
please. Yeah.
So he talked about the power of imperfection, and I quote, "Whatever you now find weird, ugly, uncomfortable, and nasty about a new medium will surely become its signature. CD distortion, the jitteriness of digital video, the crap sound of 8-bit, all of these will be cherished and emulated as soon as they can be avoided. It's the sound of failure. So much modern art is the sound of things going out of control, a medium pushing to its limits and breaking apart. The distorted guitar sound is the sound of something too loud for the medium supposed to carry it. The blues singer with the cracked voice is the sound of an emotional cry too powerful for the throat that releases it. And the excitement of grainy film, of bleached out black and white, is the excitement of witnessing events too momentous for the medium assigned to record them." And I read that
That
and
is
I
so
was
good.
I know. I wish I wrote it. I didn't. But I just read, I read that and I kind of, yeah, yeah, that's the thing. And I think, this is like why I kind of decided to approach the music and the score for Electric Love the way I did. I can play you another beat if you
Yeah,
want.
before you do though,
Yeah,
or while
sure.
you're pulling that up, yeah,
Yeah.
a couple things that jump to my mind, um, is yeah, the limitation aspect
Mm-hmm.
and your desire to utilize a limitation of sound definitely gives this show an authentic feeling, which is beautiful and wonderful. Like to the extent that a song like that, the first time I heard it, I was like, "Oh yeah, this sounds like 80s German pop," right?
Yeah.
Or like there are several moments in your score as well where I'm like, "Oh, I feel like I'm watching Brazil right now." Like we are in a world
Yeah.
very clearly. I never wonder about it. I never feel like we're faking it. It feels genuinely within the 80s. And then watching you go through the process of experimenting with that as the baseline, how do I want to break open the other elements of the music of that time period and the various styles of 80s music that you use into musical theater world?
Yeah.
Like where do I want to have those compromises? Where do I not? That's been such a fascinating journey for me to watch.
Yeah, and it's been a fascinating kind of experience for me to go through, because I think my way back when I started writing the songs, my approach was I'm just gonna write pop songs. I wasn't like 32 bar chorus was something, I don't know, it sounded like something out of outer space. I didn't know what it was, What do you mean 32 bars? Yeah, I have like 16 bars in a decent kind of chorus. And it was like something that I wanted at some point. I felt like I wanted to open up an experience and
Yeah,
bring the theatrical writing into the pop writing and kind of mash the two together. It's something I'm still working on. It's something that, going back to some songs I wrote like some time ago, I already know I want to rewrite them and bring, kind of open up the structure, a little bit, and just I think I have like better idea where I could take certain things.
yeah.
But yeah, structure is so
Structure.
important in songs, like in everything, but in songs, and I'm talking even before I started working on musical theater. I'm talking about pop songs,
Hmm.
structure can really make or break a song. Like you can take 2 bars from between the verse and the chorus, and things will open up in a way you wouldn't think of, just those 2 bars you took away. Or on many cases you want to trim things rather than adding, but that's another story. But yeah, definitely structure. um, Using if you have a good chorus, you want to maybe give just half the chorus the first time, don't give it all right away. Wait with it, give half a chorus, do the verse. Again, I'm talking from pop music kind of production, and then give the full chorus, because that's just something that you know kind of builds excitement in a natural way. So yeah, and of course, musical theater structure is a whole another thing that needs to be kind of explored and experimented with. And there are so many. You've got a beautiful video course again that talks about song structures and different songs, and the 32-bar chorus and everything that goes behind it,
And
which
also pop structures and how they're
and
useful in
pop
musical
structures. Sure,
theater.
sure, yeah,
And
it's there on the list. Yeah.
musical scenes, and for anyone who's curious, that's inside our community. It lives
Hmm.
there's an online community hub, and it's inside that hub. It's like an 8-hour 10 video course on
Something.
songwriting and
Yeah.
musicals.
I took 2 days to watch that, just kind of sat down and let it kind of, took down notes and let it sink. But yeah, it just tells you all you need to know about that, which is amazing.
Or at
Um,
least start. Yeah,
oh yeah, yeah.
let's hear another song. What you got
Let's
pulled
hear
up
another
for
song.
us?
Uh, let's do this. Mm,
Just also for people at home thinking about pop structure and musical theater, that's a large part of what our conversation was too, is what do we want to be the refrain, how do we want the hook to sit, how do we want to make sure that scene work is still being done even if the song is in a pop structure. Your gigantic opening number is, I think, a triumph where it's gotten to. I know you want to make changes, I'm aware, but like I think it's a triumph where you got to with that. It's incredible storytelling with all these musical motifs and multiple refrain moments that are doing great story work, and smartly utilized. But I'll
thank
shut
you.
up, and I know you've got something pulled up.
I'll play you. I'll play you actually the song "Order Received," which is a snippet from "Order Received." I know it's one of your favorites, Michael.
It is.
It went through several rewrites, and it's basically when we set loose PRCE, the personal robotic combat expert. We set him loose, and he's kind of out there, and he is supposed to see what are these intruders are doing at the mall. And of course, things take, kind of a turn for the worse, as they do in these situations. Let me just play it for you.
Killing robots, man.
Order received, order received. Cannot stop until I see objective achieved. Order received, order received. Cannot stop until I see objective achieved. Uncharted land, planting a route. Don't need to understand. Her wish is my command. Time to scout, 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 to scout, 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 scout. PRCE, data collected, unrecognized color patterns detected. PRCE, increased stimulation, sensory load calls for differentiation. PRCE.
Yeah, we need some bleepy bloops, sort of
Yeah, it's so
sound.
funny. But before we say more about that, I just have to say, for those at home, the reason I'm smiling so big during this song is because not only do I love PRCE, he's such a good character, but the motif work in this song, what it does, how it grows, how it's repurposed throughout this show, it has some really beautiful and like deep meanings to it. And so this is the first time you hear it in the show. It's like, oh, I know what's coming, and it just feels so nice.
Yeah, it's definitely been, I've been utilizing this motif and it works really nice. This sort of, it's kind of simple and you can kind of put it on in different situations, on different kind of emotional states, using the term emotional for an android very loosely. But yeah, he's getting his emotions at some point. So it sounds both, like syncopated and robotic kind of singing. This is why the melody is also you know written this way. But then when he gets his emotions and in another scenario like you mentioned, he is singing it in much more legato, and this sort of harmonic progression works as well as something which is more relaxed and feels more like a ballad rather than this sort of intensive, I'm on a hunt now, I'm gonna search those intruders and do nasty stuff. So yeah, that's definitely a motive that and again, I think it's one of those things that I kind of wrote and you pointed them out and you said, oh, this is a motive for PRCE. I might have, I could have been missing it, and just move on and never use it again. But this is
Sure.
part, I think, of being able to kind of dip into things, and again relying on someone's experience and point of view that really can make a difference, and bring your kind of vision to the next level.
Yeah. Well, early on, I think the reason that I latched onto it was early on in the process here when we were I know we went through a lot of versions of this song moment because this
Yeah,
is a character who is not yet emotional, who is singing. They are at this point a programmed android with a set of instructions, and the original intent of those instructions was murder intruders, right? It's a lot more nuanced than that now, but even in that first song, what I thought you were doing so beautifully was giving a sense of the danger and the robotic nature of this android, while at the same time, he felt so lovable. And
I
but
know.
there was nothing lovable about what he was doing, right? So there was this whole progression of where we got to now, but the motif in there of that ba da 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 was both catchy and also endearing in a way that I was like, don't lose that. He's gonna be a character we all fall in love with. Keep it around. It's got to be somewhere.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, for sure, it's a lot of the work that I put into the writing was finding the right tone for each character, because you kind of walk this fine line. I mean, you do have a killer android that does, killer android stuff, but you still want the one of our characters to kind of fall for him, or at least feel in a like it's not that bad. How do you pull that off? How are you able to pull that off within what I try to call like not a realistic situation, but real characters? Because if it's just, camp, you can do anything you want, oh, he's killing people, that's so cute. That's not a thing someone would say in the real world. So you need to be able to come up with a different solution to why the other character would fall from him in spite of his doings. And sometimes it's just like one of, the solutions was to prevent that character from seeing what he's doing. This is a simple solution, that character was present during his sort of murder spree, and then we just I decided um, to make sure she doesn't see it. So there you go, problem solved. The audience knows he's dangerous. She doesn't know he's dangerous. Thus, she could fall in love with him. And the byproduct would be, what would she think when she finds out the truth? And that also kind of builds this, dramatic kind of tension, which
Yes,
could
I
be
want to
played with.
yes and this though,
Mm.
because I think the other very smart thing here is
We're
that
having a one-on-one now, Michael. We're having a one-on-one.
well, people can get a peek behind the curtain.
Yeah.
Uh, I think the other very smart thing here about that is not only did it come down to, yes, Juliet's not there when
Hmm.
he goes on his killing spree initially, but when she does meet him, it is post the accident. So the PRCE that she meets is the one that does have an emotional imprint,
True.
which means like who he was beforehand during the killing spree is not even who she meets at all. So that when we get to that moment, which I'm very much looking forward to what that new draft of it's going to look like, that moment where she realizes who he is and what he has done, like that is going to be so heartbreaking.
Yeah.
While at the same time, the other thing that you very smartly did was endeared him to us long before he's endeared to Juliet. So we already love him, and by the time that he gets those emotions, we have felt something for him. We are curious to see what this does for him as a character, and we want things to go well. And like that's beautiful dramatic tension. This crap writes itself because your outline was so good.
Yeah. But yeah, that's the thing. I think it's about, again, we're coming back to the outline and we're going back to the question set, which also kind of helped me identify what tone. I mean, the word tone, I think I just say it, but man, like finding the right tone for this was not easy because of that sort of genre blending. If I'm going to do, John Hughes directing Friday the 13th, well, I need to do some, creative thinking about how to pull this off. Otherwise, you end up with two separate worlds that won't, mash together. And you just end up having like a confused audience, which I guess it's probably the worst thing you want to have with an audience, to
Right.
confuse them. Um, and I think like you were saying.
I was just gonna say the other major piece of this that went into this entire conversation was
Mhm.
as we were going through what the next versions of the show were looking like, was finding out how we were going to make each character three-dimensional. And did that extend to PRCE? And did that extend to our actual villain, who we haven't even talked about today? Uh, I mean, the back and forths we had about this. Does it leave B movie genre if they are three-dimensional? And does it diminish the musical if they're not three-dimensional? That was tough.
Yeah, that was tough. It was challenging. I think, it was also trial and error. On many
Sure.
occasions, I had a set of lyrics that just didn't say what needed to be said for that character. They were working like in terms of even like technically rhyming, the general kind of vibe, but the actual subtext of those, lyrics kind of led us to think, oh, and then I'm like, oh, this is not what I want the audience to get. So I need to rewrite this. So you need to be very attentive to what the characters are singing about. And we talked about it so many times, about the fact that lyrics kind of, there's like this sort of time, kind of condensed situation within lyrics that you can tell in like two lines things you might have had to say through dialogue like half a page or so.
Yeah.
So every word counts, every intent counts, and it could be a matter of, tweaking something very small, very minute, but it makes such a big difference, yeah, in terms of, the intent that you are giving to that character. And again, it could make it a cardboard character, or you can make it like a not super. I don't have like super deep characters here because it's not a super deep kind of thing. But again,
But they're
I mean,
people.
yeah, these are people, exactly. And I think we called it like B movie setting with kind of A movie kind of characters. So they are, and which is kind of aligns for me to what I think when I was a teenager, the world kind of felt like one big, I don't know if horror movie, but I definitely felt like it was strange. The world felt strange to me. So this is kind of also something that I feel resonates with how these characters react, especially the teenagers, but not just. Our villain, our antagonist, she's living in her own nightmarish kind of situation, and she's also not in sync with the real world per se. So there's a representation that is kind of, a little on the nose of, this monstrous or killer android, but it does connect with the actual things she wants to do. She has a reason for creating this android. I think like again, I talked about it that one of the maybe the deeper themes in Electric Love is the idea of transition, and specifically
Yes.
that year, so what was so special about like 89? I chose and I realized I chose that year. From a writer's perspective, it's almost got to be like its own character for me. 1989. It's this sort of weird in between time. When 80s parties were winding down and shoulder pads starting to are retired, but grunge and all that hasn't taken over just yet. So
Yeah.
massive change was just around the corner.
Mhm.
Nobody knew exactly what's coming. People got more introspective. New age culture was starting to take shape. MTV Unplugged is born,
Oh.
which is such a
Mm.
big difference. If you look at, the music produced in the 80s, and then you have like Unplugged, prime time, just, some of the biggest shows in music history were, MTV Unplugged, sort of performances. So, where are we? And I think back in the 80s, also malls were the place to be. And here we
Yeah.
have this sort of faded, almost post-apocalyptic, version of mall as our main stage. Like the mall itself is kind of dying along with the decade, and this specific mall is kind of dead on arrival, but still. And for these characters, it's the death, or not death, but yeah, their comfort zone is gone, and it's the end of adolescence and uncertainty of adulthood. So all of those things kind of jive for me very well with the sort of B movie setting, because it does feel like it doesn't make sense in a way. It does feel over the top. It feels too much. It feels overwhelming.
Yeah. Yeah. I think you really hit on something with the transition of the late 80s into the
Mm,
90s, just generally speaking. I think it is a time that we even look back on the films made in the late 80s and even into the early 90s, which had started pre-production in the 80s. And you can
yeah,
see that there's a clear, like, it is a moment in time very specifically. And it's
yeah,
a moment that we go back to because it feels like we're always on the precipice of something else.
yeah,
And there's a nostalgia to that that is super attractive, I think, to the mind, generally speaking, and it makes for a perfect setting of characters who are going through some real stuff here, right? We've got teenagers on the verge of graduation, people wondering like, where are they going to go in their lives? Can I follow my dreams? Will this romance work out? Is this a last opportunity? Who am I? What's my sexuality? We have a theme of grief in here. We have questions about family and what it means. We have questions about how to treat other humans as human beings, how to treat a non-human as a human
mm,
being, coming to terms with who you are versus who you were. Like there's a lot of really meaty themes in here wrapped in this beautiful package of yeah, an 80s B horror setting that has such heart to it. In a lot of ways, it reminds me of the way that I think we all feel the heart in Stranger Things as a TV show. Like
yeah,
that's 80s horror, and it's making like no apologies about that at all. And
sure.
yet we get we get such a cultural phenomenon when a new season drops because everyone cares so freaking much about those
For
characters.
sure. For the characters. Yeah. Yeah. If the characters weren't that well written, then I think it wouldn't be as successful. It probably comes down to the characters, because you can kind of inject, that again, that 80s sort of vibe into anything, you just set it up in
Yes.
that time period. It's super popular. But once you have characters that you really care about, then also I think it talks about how universal and kind of some issues are. You are dealing today, we are dealing today as society, as individuals, whatever, with stuff that we can look at, someone from the 80s, for example, and say, oh man, they've been dealing with the same, maybe some stuff had like different names, but it's still like this sort of universal human experience, that we
Yeah.
can connect to. And this is just something, if it's done the right way, then you just connect to the characters, and and once you connect to the characters, you're bound to connect to the story. There's
Yeah.
no way to, around it, I think.
Yeah, especially in a way, in a world,
In a world.
where uh, Gen X and forward, we have all lived through major experiences within the first 25 to 30 years of life, all the way down to anyone who's born right now, where we feel like we're constantly on a precipice, right?
Yeah.
Once we had the major technology shift going into the information era, there was no more, I know exactly what tomorrow looks like,
Mm-hmm.
as like, for instance, my parents' generation and older would have felt like. This is this is something that just resonates with people because we're all feeling this all day, every day in various ways. And I think for me, it's one of the things that excites me about your show so much and why I think doing all that deep work on who these people are so that we can so easily identify and empathize, even as, even before PRCE gets his emotions, we watch him go through a process of, oh, I thought this was my order, but something just changed. Now I feel like this is my order, and we're all like, no, don't do that, right? But we recognize that's not his fault. It's the
Sure.
programming of the world around him, and like even that, so freaking universal, man. This is
Yeah,
good
it is.
stuff.
Thanks you. Yeah, I mean, definitely. And I think it also kind of, circles back to what I was like talking about again, discovering your true self in a world that kind of values wrong things. And I think, again, it's something, it's not, I wouldn't say that as something that applies to everything and everyone on every situation, but it's definitely there. And it's kind of interesting to see how through the decades, we replicate our kind of these things, just give them different names and different means and different platforms
Yeah,
to engage with those things. But yeah, there's definitely something universal, I think, about, and again, our sort of generation looking at the 80s. This is like, for me, I was born like, 77, so I was like 10 or so when, it was like 87 or 12.
mhm,
So it's such a pivotal time in my, like, I
yeah,
was imprinted with some stuff during that time. Like, this is a part of my childhood's DNA,
yeah,
and for many people as well, I guess.
absolutely.
Um,
Yeah, I want to be cautious of time because
sure.
I don't want to keep you forever. I know that the two of us can talk
Oh,
forever.
yeah, we can. But
A couple of things that I'm going to want to know as we head toward the end of our conversation
mhm.
here, I think would be good for the audience to know as well is, yeah, I mean, you over the past year and a half, like I know this journey has not been easy, and
Mhm.
it's it takes a lot out of you for sure. I was wondering if you want to speak to that a little bit, perhaps to deliver some nuggets of wisdom to people that you've learned that you feel like other people in similar situations may take away. I mean, a lot of the stuff I know you're going to mention and stuff I still constantly feel, and I've been doing this for over 15 years.
Yeah.
Um, and then just uh, yeah, what maybe along those same lines, what maybe surprised you that you didn't expect to come up?
Sure. I think basically I could kind of say I can share some mistakes or things I did the wrong way along the
Sure.
way that I can, to kind of advise people. Of course, everyone will have their own journey, but I think some mistakes are more common than others,
Yeah.
and I think are worth sharing. And some things that are actually like good, I think, habits that I kind of tried to, make part of my routine, or my, not just my writing routine, but part of my life routine,
Ah.
to to be able to kind of survive this thing. Again,
Mm-hmm.
I think, musical theater, it's like it's a beast like nothing else, in terms of the actual resources that are required to make this happen,
Yeah.
if only just for the writing process. So I think the first thing I would say, I didn't do enough like basic research on how musical theater works before I kind of embarked on this journey. And, you know, watching shows, of course, like you said, it's important, but it won't necessarily teach you everything you need to know about, you know, writing one. And what's tricky is when a show works really well, it kind of hides very well how much sweat and tears went into its creation. It's when you see the seams, you know, this is when you're like the show may kind of flop. It looks effortless, but that's the magic of it. So I really had to kind of dig deeper into the structure and mechanics of musical theater to really understand it. And I think another mistake I made, you know, early on was investing too many resources in recording and perfecting my songs. And I'm gonna put it with a grain of salt because I know my songs are you know, these demos are quite produced,
Yeah.
especially if you you know, to like a piano vocal. But I actually thought that, you know, the way to make the songs work would make their sound perfect. You know, that was my goal. But, you know, the truth is, the bitter truth is, things change, lyrics and sections and entire songs are ripped apart and, you know, brought back to life again. So coming from the film music and, you know, like music and production background, I am able to put like decent demos together, but I would definitely recommend don't overdo it. I mean, make sure, you know, just that your songs are working, piano, guitar, vocal. If they work in like with this sort of presentation and you don't have the resources to produce them or orchestrate them or whatever, just make them work the best you can in that format and keep on writing. Don't spend like a month on trying to record something that you will end up probably you'll have to, you know, change things. So yeah, use your
Yeah.
resources sparingly.
Let
I
me just jump in on that point real fast
Sure.
because I do know a lot of you out there, especially a lot of people who have reached out to me about this and asked me this question on the YouTube channel or other social media platforms. Um, how can I record my demos? Where can I make them sound great? How much money do I need to spend right now? How much money can I spend right now? Where are those great studios? Do I hire Broadway people? My answer to that is that you have to really pick and choose and use your resources well along the journey to know at what point the song is close enough to where it's probably never going to change in a drastic way again. And at that point, I would create a demo or film a performance of someone doing your song where it's like, okay, that is representative of the show. And even if I make tweaks, it will still be representative of the show. I can now do that work. Early on, y'all, is not the time. If
No.
your show's gonna change at all structurally, which means musically, if your characters may change, if you haven't had a production yet, and you don't even know if your songs actually work, like this is not the time to be doing the big production.
Sure.
Wait.
And also, I would say, even if you would make those investments, it would kind of, you would then might be tempted to tell yourself, okay, let's not do any more rewrites because the song is produced and it sounds so nice. So let's not rock that boat, which is probably the worst thing you could do. I think I told you, like, I've been working, I had like three versions of the Act Break song, which I'm still
Yeah.
working on. You know, we talked about it just a couple of weeks ago. And there's something, and I did one kind of attempt for the song, which didn't work. I made another attempt for the song, which didn't work. And I told you that there was something so liberating about being able to say, okay, let's scrap that.
Yeah.
It doesn't work. It, you know, it could be like a heartbreaking moment if you're if you invested a lot of money in it, but also if you're like super like, you know, attached to the song. But it also can be a moment of absolute liberation when it's like, I don't need to have that song if it doesn't work. I don't have to. I'm not married to it for Christ's sake. It's like
Yeah.
I can write a better song to do a better job. And it's such a good kind of, you know, starting. Of course, sometimes you will have to do some tweaks, but sometimes it just won't work. You'll
Yep.
need to take a totally different approach. And you've heard like couple attempts that I did that were they were nice songs as songs, but they were so far off from what I wanted that, you know, moment to be. So they had to be written like a new song had to be written from ground up. So yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
But even that, like, I would all of these excuse me, all of these quote unquote mistakes is that was part of the learning journey, right? A
Oh, for
mistake is
sure.
always just a lesson. And even with each of those songs, I think you discovered like, oh, I seem to be resisting a thing here.
Yeah.
So what happens if?
Yeah, it's definitely it's I think every mistake you make is definitely it's a step to something else. You know, there's always something to take from your mistakes. Time is never wasted.
Right.
Uh, don't, it's so easy to be hard on yourself and just say, I'm not good, it's not working. You know, no, this is a new opportunity for you to do it better, to do it differently. This is why you need the tools to ask the right questions, I think, because if you
Yeah.
don't know how to ask the right questions, you will have the instincts to say this is not working, but then like what's going to be now, what's now, and you're kind of clueless. If you know how to ask the question and say, okay, I need to do this because this is not working and that's not working, you will have a plan and you can
Yep.
start something that actually would work. And that thing might not be perfect, it would be better. And you do another rewrite and another one, and you will get it, eventually. Um, and it kind of brings me to, I think I can't, when I started, I underappreciated how long this whole process of writing a show takes. And I think there are
Well,
so many moving parts, and it's so easy to get, frustrated when things don't move as quickly as you'd like. And I really learned it's fine. It's very intensive. It's okay to slow down from once in a while,
yep.
Um, expecting things to take time. Um, it's part of the journey. It's not, it's important to accept it. I mean, set goals, but make sure they make sense. For example, like my goal for 2025 is to have like a full reading and some sort of basic presentation. That's all. If more would happen, I would be more than happy. But this is like my goals for next year. I'm not planning on, selling it to any producer just yet. Um, so I think when it's realistic goal, then you are being more kind of nice with yourself. You're
Agreed.
not kind of setting yourself to fail. Um,
Yeah.
and I think also we didn't talk a lot about creative blocks, but I would just say that the value of stepping away when you hit a block, and I hit a
Mm,
major creative block like a couple of months ago, as you remember.
I do. Yeah.
And it took me some time to kind of realize that what I needed was to actually take a few weeks off.
Hmm.
I did other stuff. I did house chores, unrelated creative projects. The lawn never looked better.
Yeah.
And it made a huge difference, because I think taking breaks doesn't make you lazy or
No.
unprofessional. It sometimes, your mind and body kind of telling you it's time to recharge. And the way to tell that in this, situation is hit you with a block. Nothing would feel right. Nothing would rhyme. Everything would feel dull. This is time to take a break, take a step back, take a, deep breath and kind of, yeah, it's fine and be okay with it. It's really
Right.
okay.
Grant
Yeah.
yourself the grace. I say this to people all the time. I said it to you. It's rest is never not moving forward. Rest is actually a part of the moving forward process. Stepping away is part of progress. And I know it doesn't feel like it at the time. That's not the way that we are told progress works, but it makes such a huge difference. Like for a quick anecdote there, yesterday I went to rehearsal of a first reading of a first draft of a show, and the writers were asking me questions about like, well, how long does this really take? This has already been such a long process. I was like, oh, you were early in development, and the look of fear in their eyes. And I was like, well, the show I just told you about so King's Legacy, y'all, the one that is finally ready to go, ready for big production. 12 years. It's been almost a full 12 years since I started that project. And their eyes were like super wide. And they're like, that gives me so much comfort. So I don't have to rush. I was like, no, don't rush. In fact, I took 3 years off of even touching that show. But that's how I was able to finish it by taking the time off, working on other things, building out this YouTube channel and the business, and working on other writing projects. Time off isn't a problem. It's
Sure.
gonna help you in the end. I promise.
Absolutely. Taking care of yourself, you know, it sounds kind of, mundane to say, but, like actually sleep well, eat well, drink water, exercise. Some of my like best breakthroughs have actually, they came like when I was doing yoga or while I was running. I was kind of struggling with
Shower,
something.
walk.
Shower. Oh, for sure. Yeah, hot water all over, and your mind is like a carousel of ideas. So yeah, for sure. And I think like the last thing from like the technical point of view, uh, another habit that was really helpful for me was um, keep a document, like a bucket
Mm,
list of ideas, of phrases, of words, of situations you randomly encounter through your journey on this crazy little planet called Earth. Just, stuff that comes along your way. It's just, I can't tell you how many times I was absolutely stumped and I was looking at that document and something that someone said somewhere kind of just, clicked, and I had like the best kind of, response to that certain situation, or I had a solution for something that I didn't know how to solve. Just, make that list, put it on the cloud, update it and use it. The world is just, is there to give you so many ideas to, to work with. It's a
absolutely.
playground.
A place for your interests and fascinations and inspirations. My creativity coaches, Susan Blackwell and Laura Canyon, would call that your spark file.
Okay.
And I think it's a beautiful and brilliant idea because not only does it just rekindle your joy for creativity at any given low moment, but yeah, it can absolutely be something to look through and be like, okay, is there something in here that helps me through this little writing block, this moment? The
Yeah.
answer is usually yes.
And things will start kind of coming your way. You'd be watching a TV show and suddenly, oh, this is how they do it. So I can apply that in a different way to my situation. And it just, would be, because, at the end of the day, we're not inventing the wheel. We're telling a like story, but we're using tools that are, other writers like storytelling. I think it's like maybe the oldest form of um, you know, um, art, I'd say, because people were telling stories through, painting pictures on caves and stuff. That was storytelling, graphic novels of the Stone Age. So yeah.
Yeah. So as we're wrapping up here,
Hmm.
which I know I said 15 minutes ago we were gonna be wrapping
I
up, but
know.
yeah, we talk a
Yeah.
lot. Any last thoughts, any final words? What's next for the show? And then we'll have you play us out as we say goodbye with a little song clip if you don't mind.
I
But
would love to.
yeah, any last things for us where you're headed next?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I think the next step for Electric Love Murder Machine is to kind of keep refining the script and the music. And like I said, I'm aiming to do reading and some sort of presentation next year, and just getting it kind of up on its feet, even if like in a raw form, I think is kind of key to figure out what works and what needs fine tuning. Bring it to some sort of feedback situation from both creatives and audiences.
Yeah.
And beyond that, I'm kind of, continuing to grow as a writer, as composer. I want to push
Person.
myself, on both areas, explore,
Yeah.
and meet people as well, connecting with other creators. I know I already did that on your beautiful community that you created. Met many, made such lovely connections, and I just love hearing about people's projects. So, reach out, whoever you are. Let's complain about stuff or celebrate or argue whether Evil Dead 2 is a sequel or a
Ah,
remake. I don't know, or a requel.
where
What's
can
up?
people reach out to you? Where they can they follow you?
Yeah, so I got my website at stav, music.com,
Great.
and they can find me there. And I have my, kind of email thingy, email box at that website. They can also hear not music from the show because I'm still working on it, but music from my scores and films.
Mhm.
And
Beautiful.
Yeah, and you can just look me up, Steve Drieman, Instagram, yeah, stuff like that. I don't do
And
TikTok. I'm too old. I'm sorry.
I also feel that way, and still here I am. Great. I'll put those in the description below, and obviously, friends, if you want to come join our community, Steve is very active in the community, always there for labs, and a beautiful, wonderful piece of the community, and that's a great way to connect with him and hear more of the show, which really is worth it. So. Before you play us out, I'll just say, hey, everybody, thank you so much. If you enjoyed this interview, hearing more about individual specific journeys for people in their shows, let me know in the comments below because I will do more of these. I've got plenty of clients I can interview, and I'm very happy to do so. This is a first time, and Steve felt like a great first client guest interview. I hope you agreed. Honestly, I think today was just filled with gold. So much gold in here. So I will see you all soon for a next live stream or a next video. And Steve, what are you going to play us out with as we dance our way to goodness here?
Yeah, I'm just gonna, I think I'm gonna let you roll with the latest song I'm working on. It's called In the Name of Love, and it's not in the name of love that you're thinking of. It's just that, lyrical hook. And it's, part of the act break, work in progress, just a snippet of the verse chorus thing. But yeah, good
Love
stuff.
it.
Yeah,
A
let's do it.
sneak peek to take us out. Here we go. Stones. What a great thing to offer to people.
The writing is dead on the wall.
With one bullet to go,
I should know
so I might as well bite.
when it's heavy to make the right call.
And
You gotta make the freaking call right. So many questions on my mind, think they'll have to wait. I feel the tensions, but for once I'm thinking straight. This is why I should try in the name of love. Hell yeah!
my subroutines collide, but one thing stays the same. I try to override, but keep getting back her name. And it's clear that I'm here in the name of love. In the name of love, it isn't always nice to take the pill. I can't be truly
That's so
stopped
good.
until I
Thank you all so much. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you again soon, everybody.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.